Hey guys, welcome to episode 10 of the Portland Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm Stephen Tran.
And I'm your co-host, Jordan Lee.
Yeah, and for this episode, we had a really special guest.
Who's that special guest?
Yeah. So we actually had Jordan on. I know we haven't really heard of his story, but he has a really interesting career path. He went from being a professional chef to now, Portland's renowned mortgage lender.
That's right.
Yeah, and we got to hear how he got into investing. I know that you started with your first primary residence, and then you turned it into a rental.
Yeah, I turned it into a rental, and I took a home equity line of credit, so I felt like I was buying my dream house or my current house without putting any money down.
Yeah, you existed equities, which was really cool. You also gave us some insight on that. Your very first tenant was Section 8, which can be really scary for a lot of people.
Yeah, and she's still my tenant now.
Yeah, and kind of brings down the the stigma on Section 8, which is actually not too bad. And then with your next investment, you tell us a little bit about renting to a nonprofit, Oxford Homes, which you'll hear a little bit more about later.
Yeah, tune into the episode to check that out.
Okay, thanks guys. Hey guys, welcome to episode 10 of the Portland Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm here with my special co-host, Alex Fan, and we're interviewing today Jordan Lee, our original and normal co-host. Hey Jordan, how's it going?
Great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, I thought today would be a really good opportunity to kind of hear your story. I know we interview a lot of interesting people, but obviously we're in an investing podcast and we want to learn a little bit more about our co-hosts. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey?
Sure. I don't know where you want to get started, but
from the very beginning,
from the top,
from kindergarten. How about you kind of just tell us where you're at right now? We can kind of get into how you got there.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a mortgage lender. I'm licensed in 12 states now, and I started back in 2016. So it's been 6 years, and the first few years were a lot of building, and it probably took 3 years to become more of a stable business. And then once I got to that point, I was able to finally start investing, which was kind of part of the whole original plan of why I got into mortgage and real estate.
Okay. And can you kind of give us a look into what your portfolio looks like right now?
Sure. Yeah. So it's not expansive, but it's all single family. So I purchased a home in 2012. That was, that time I was working as a cook, making I think $12 an hour, and back in 2012, homes in Portland, you could still buy stuff in like the 150 to 200 range. That was like pretty nice. Three twos, four twos. And like mine was built in 2007. There's no yard or anything.
And just so everyone's clear, I think this is your first primary residence, right?
First primary residence, exactly. Yeah, first home, first purchase, back in 2012, and So in that time, things were a little bit more affordable, and rates were pretty good too. I think in the mid threes. And my grandma had recently passed away. And so my parents were like, hey, you guys just got married. Do you want to wait until we die to get your grandma's inheritance, or do you want to take your portion now for a down payment on a home? It wasn't on my radar at all. I was just had my head down and I was cooking the line, just making enough money to pay rent. Right. So I wasn't thinking about, I was saving money for retirement, but I wasn't thinking about buying a house at the time. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll buy a house. Sure. Why not? So I took that, used that as the down payment and bought a home back in 2012. And then, fast forward 8 years later, was able to, leverage the equity on that home to use I took a home equity line of credit to use as a down payment for my current home. My current primary, and so I converted my old home into a rental, and there was enough equity in there for the down payment, as I was saying, but there was also the rents had increased enough that I was able to pay both my first that I'm able to pay both my first and second mortgage with that rent payment. Um, and I was able to, like, I don't know, it felt like I was cheating, right? So that's cash flowing, and I didn't put any money down on the home that I'm in right now, essentially. So
Hmm.
and I'd always, like, this was kind of my long term plan from the beginning. I'd always wanted to do that, and I kind of told clients about this strategy and talked to them about it, but it didn't really become clear to me until I actually did it that it was it's a great method, because now that asset's still growing on the side. So that's the first rental that I got. And then in 2020 and 2021, for those of us in real estate, it was a pretty strong year. It was really fortunate to have a little extra income that year. So I took some of that and invested with a partner. We bought two rentals together, so we're both half owners, and we're both on the loan on those. And both of those are just single family homes that we're renting to nonprofits and to a nonprofit, and those both kind of cash flow, and they're just kind of sitting there.
Yeah, can you talk about that a little bit more? Like what nonprofit and how does that work?
Yeah, so the nonprofit's called Oxford Home, and it's really great. They sign a 5-year lease, and they have built-in rent increase into it. I mean, the amount of rent increase in hindsight is, I think, lower than what market is now. I think, what did we just see that?
Yeah. On hot off the presses in Oregon, they just announced this morning that looking forward to next year, Oregon residential landlords can increase rents to a maximum of just about 14%, just a little hair over that. 14%.
This is for 2023, for the year
2023.
2023, because the rule is what, CPI plus
Right.
7 or something.
Exactly. Consumer price index plus a margin of 7%, and also only applies to properties that are 15 years or older.
Okay.
15 years and older.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, our built-in agreement is 3%, which we're happy with, and we don't have to change the tenant for 5 years. And what Oxford Homes does is they provide homes for people that need a second chance. People that have gone through addiction treatment, are out of prison or whatever, and so then they house them, and it helps them kind of get back on their feet while they're getting jobs and staying sober, and so it's a great opportunity for them. I mean, they pay above market rent, so it's kind of in my opinion, a sort of win-win scenario for everyone. And
In those situations, do they also manage or take care of the maintenance, or what are their responsibilities? Since this is more, sounds like a corporate type lease.
yeah, so it's not triple net in the commercial sense where it's like they do everything, right? This is supposedly, they're supposed to take care of all the little stuff, so like everything under $500 is written into the contract. But if the roof were to need repairing, or a furnace, or some big ticket item like that, we would be responsible for taking care of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So to recap, I heard that your first rental property was your first home that you bought.
Yeah,
And
primary conversion.
exactly. So a lot of things I mentioned that I always tell clients, your first investment is the home you own. Like sometimes as a real estate agent, I'm talking to clients who are looking to buy rental. Like, have you considered just buying a new home for yourself and converting yours?
It's true, and I see that a lot in the media recently these days about people, influencers saying, oh, like, yeah, I'm never gonna buy a home. I'm just gonna rent all my life, and I'm just gonna move around here and rent here and rent here. And I'm like, well, I mean, that for some people with a specific lifestyle, maybe, but I think for the average person, if it's the easiest way, right? You buy a primary home, you build equity in it, and after whatever 3, 5, 10, however your income cycle looks like, you buy a second one and then convert this one into a rental, and it cash flows.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great way of building a retirement portfolio, and the easiest way, in my opinion.
And as a renter, just to follow up on that rent increase we talked about, when you're buying a home, you're locking in a fixed rate for 30 years, right? And so you're hedged against any potential rent increases to yourself. It's not forever, right? Jordan didn't stay in that home forever, and now he used all that appreciation he gained and everything else. He's leveraging it. You took a home equity line of credit out, so no additional funds out, and you're able to buy your new home and maintain that. That's amazing.
Yeah, and I always say like kind of worst case scenario, you have options, right? You can sell it, or you can sell portions of your portfolio or convert them all to rentals, or
Hmm.
what I like about that is it just gives you options.
Yeah. Wow. Your grandmother must be very pleased in heaven right now with
Yeah,
what you've done. That's amazing, Jordan.
I hope she's happy with the way we use the money. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about the impacts generationally that has, and what she was able to leave for you guys to be able to benefit from. And now with our wits, we've applied that and leveraged it and built more. And Jordan, if you didn't know, has 3 children. So this is going to be looking forward down for them, right? Helping them out.
Yeah, it's like the old mentality, and at least in my parents and our families, it's like gotta have a place where the kids can live, right? So my dad's always, he wanted to pay off the mortgage. He'd be like, no matter what, you guys will have a place to live. So that's the goal, is to make sure that the kids, no matter what happens, they have some place to live.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yep. And I kind of wanted to go back to the Oxford Health
Yeah.
model. Like, is there anything that, people should be concerned about with this model? I know that people can be wary of, putting, people who need a second chance in there. Have you had any problems at
Yeah,
all?
no, that's a good question, because if you use that word halfway home, and I had this when I told the loan officer I was like getting a halfway. He was asking me like, oh, what's the rent you're getting on this? Like, why are you guys buying a rental here because we also bought one in South Dakota, and he's like, oh, you guys are putting a halfway home in that neighborhood, and I'm like, yeah, it's a group of people, 6 to 8 people that that need a second chance, and so people worry that your home's gonna have problems. Personally, we haven't had any. We've only owned it for 2 years now, but I try and go and visit once a year and bring by like a Christmas gift type thing, and I usually talk to the guys, and last time I was there, one of the guys was like, "Oh man, like you have no idea how much this was life changing for us, just to be able to be kind of off the street, and that was like really all that I needed to be able to get my mind right and to be able to work a regular job." So I think there is a lot of kind of that mindset of like, oh, the home's gonna get trashed,
Yeah.
but the Oxford Home is a very reputable organization, and they vet their people. They go through programs, and of course, there is going to be more use on the home than I would say if you had one standard tenant that was there for 15 years, right?
Yeah.
But so there's more people using the bathrooms and coming in and out, but at the same time, you're probably not moving in and out a bunch of big furniture too. So if you have a single family rental that is turning people, you're renewing a lease every year or two, you might have people banging around furniture every year or two too, that could cause that. That's kind of like the main structural internal damage, I would say, as well. So
Okay. And so the Oxford House, they pay you just like one flat rate every single month. And there's just like a lot of turnover with all the rooms. Is that how it works?
yeah, exactly. So the Oxford homes, they take care of cycling out the individual tenants. And so we just get a check from whoever's. Usually there's like a senior person that's lived in the home for a few years, or kind of running it, that takes care of mailing the check.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I mean, like, I'm glad that we're kind of tackling this stigma of, obviously, halfway houses, Section 8, things like
Oh
that.
yeah, that's actually my tenant in my first primary my first rental is a Section 8 tenant as well, which is kind of interesting stigma too.
Yeah.
Uh,
Let's just, for our audience who aren't familiar with what Section 8 is, could you go into an explanation?
Yeah, so Section 8 folks, for example, this tenant of mine has a disability, so she gets payment from the county for every month. She gets a benefit for her disability, a voucher for housing, basically. Um, and it's really well. It's in my opinion, I thought it was pretty well vetted. So what happened was that we had a contract between the tenant and I, and Section 8 looked at that tenant, so they wanted to make sure they had a set rule about how much the rent could be. So I'm a little bit under market on that house. I'm not like, the maximizing my profit on that house for sure. Um, so because they want it to be deemed or considered affordable.
Yeah.
And then they also send out an inspector that will like make sure that things are to code, and that the number of bedrooms, because they base the calculations on number of bedrooms. And it's kind of interesting because I learned a hard lesson. Long story short is that like the tenant was asking me, she's like, hey, is it all right if I put some carpet in the garage, because her disability is that she had a leg injury, so she can't navigate stairs really well. So she wanted to be able to have a room downstairs, and I'm like, oh, yeah, like I don't mind you putting carpet in the garage, but I also don't want you to like sleep and live in the garage. And so I was like, okay, what if I like renovate the garage, convert it into like a room, and it would, the win-win for me was like, okay, if I can make it a 5-bedroom instead of a 4-bedroom, then I can increase Section 8 what the payout will be, because the affordability level on a 4-bedroom is different than a 5-bedroom, right? And so I was like, okay, I got a contractor. They did great work. And then Section 8 did their inspection, and I didn't wall off the furnace. And so like that room wasn't considered a legitimate bedroom because it wasn't completely walled off, even though there's carbon monoxide detector or whatever, closet, windows, everything. But yeah, so long story short, it was still considered a 4th bed. So I did the renovation, and I didn't get my win out of it. She got her win out of it, which is fine, which is good. I mean, I mostly did it because I felt bad having someone sleeping in an uninsulated garage. But yeah, it's just long story short is that I think Section 8 does a good job of vetting the place, making sure it's a good living spot, making sure it's affordable. And then they also, if the tenant doesn't like pay, or doesn't keep the house nice, they're not going to keep giving them that benefit. You know what I mean? They're going to cut them off from that benefit. So they kind of follow up on that. And then as from a landlord perspective, I don't ever ask my tenant for rent. I just get a direct deposit in my account from the county on the same day every month, which is really nice. Sometimes people pay by check or whatever, or you have to ask them for a Venmo, or I don't know how you guys all do your stuff, but sometimes that accounting part is like the worst part when you have multiple rentals. But that one's by far the easiest to manage because it comes in a direct deposit in the county.
The tenant in the Section 8 scenario have to make a contribution to rent as well? Like, so the state or county
That's true.
subsidizes and they are responsible for a portion?
That's true, and I do collect that portion separately from her. That's a good point. And in my case, the tenant, she's great. She signed a 3-year lease, and she actually always pays it pretty far in advance. She's really good at identifying programs that can help her from the county and from the city and from the state. So she just like applies for that and then sends it over and prepays for like the year, basically.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And you said Section 8, they do, or the county or whoever the housing authority is, they do annual inspections, or how frequently do they inspect the tenant's
I don't
property?
think they do. I don't know. They came out right before when we were negotiating the contract and setting everything up, but they haven't come out since. But I do have to notify them like 90 days in advance for a rent increase, even though it's like built into the contract. So
Yeah.
So you're doing like quarterly checkups every once in a while, just kind of popping out there, or
I go out there like around Christmas time, drop something off.
Yeah.
I think I've go and trim the tree once a year, just because that thing is like just a decorative plum that grows like crazy, but nothing too crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this is a great story of, obviously Section 8 kind of working out. Like I said, a lot of people really are scared of taking tenants that are in Section 8, thinking that hey, maybe these tenants won't be responsible or they won't have the care that, like a paying tenant might have. But I would say this is that, you can get a bad tenant who, is qualified too.
Oh
So, which
yeah.
has happened to me. So, like sometimes it's good to have like that guaranteed money coming in, especially when they do check in and make sure that everything is up to code.
Yeah, and like I don't think they want to mess up that benefit, if
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they
Right. They
can
can
lose
lose
it.
that. They can lose it. Right. Interesting. Where do you see Jordan now that you've got these homes? What's your kind of vision of the future for investing?
Yeah, so I mean I'm kind of like I don't set like the moon goal. I usually set the goal of like, okay, let's achieve this one. I know I can achieve this at some point. I just don't know when. So right now, what I'd really like to see is to have the portfolio be like fully sustainable, right? When to me that means like I mean they're cash flowing. I've been able to recoup all the initial investment, and then be able to reinvest without having to pull from like my own personal savings, right? So, like basically, if you think about a business, right, as a business, you want to be able to reinvest in yourself. You want to be able to reinvest in your employees. You don't want to have to keep getting money from investors, right? You want to be able to just
Right.
using your own cash flow to keep going.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my thought is to like that's step one is to be invested in to the point where it can um, just sustain itself. And that way it'll just continue to slowly grow over time. And what I think that looks like is having enough cash flow to produce a down payment for another property every like year to year and a half. So something where it'll be able to keep growing, and then eventually over time kind of consolidate and refine. But that's kind of my current mindset for that, and just to eventually be able to, of course, offset all my personal expenses as well.
Okay. I want to ask different. What made you want to partner on these second and third investments rather than you know going on your own? I guess.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the first one that we purchased was kind of like I wasn't thinking about it a lot. I mean, I knew I wanted to buy an investment property, but I wasn't like 100% ready. And it was right after I had bought my primary. It was very soon after that. But what happened for the first Oxford home is the owner that was that owned the home passed away in a car accident. And so Oxford Home reached out to a partner of mine and was like, "Hey, we need someone to buy this home that wants to keep it as an Oxford home because we don't want it to be converted to a primary because we don't want to displace all we don't have a spot to move these guys." So it was really fast. We had to buy it like really quickly. And from a capital perspective, it's just easier, to work with a partner. So my friend was like, "Hey, you wanna go in on this?" And we don't really have time to think about it, but I mean, rates were really good at the time, and it's like I was just like, okay, it looks good on paper, and so I went. I mean, we went for it, and then like a year later, something came up in South Dakota, and it was kind of the same thing. What happened was they were like, "Hey, we didn't choose South Dakota. It was more like Oxford Homes, like, hey, we need investors in South Dakota really bad. There's like a huge need for halfway homes there. Can you guys please like buy a couple?" And we're just like, what's in South Dakota? Like, yeah. I mean, I've never been out there. We've never checked it out, but we on paper it looked good, and in the last 10 years, the market had doubled value wise. And so we're like, well, that's kind of similar to Portland. I mean, it looks okay on paper. This one that we've had hasn't required any maintenance. I mean, we're not having to actively manage it. So I guess we'll try for it. And so for me, yeah, the point of the partnership is, well, there's a lot of things going on there. Like, so in that partnership, he finds the deals. He has the network, and he finds the deals, and he has and capital. And so then on my end, I mean, we're splitting the capital, the initial investment. We go in 50-50. But then on my end, I do the mortgage, and he negotiates the contract. So that there's that too. There's that kind of natural partnership where I do the finance part. I set up the bank account and put the mortgages on auto pay or whatever. Um, so there's that mechanical part, but I mean I think the biggest reason to partner is just to barrier of entry, to lower your barrier of entry. But yeah, I mean of course partnership can be hard. It can be or it can be easier. I mean it just depends on it can make some things easier and it can make some things harder, I guess. But I think the biggest boon for sure is just being able to get in with less capital.
Okay. And then jumping to South Dakota, like, how was your first experience with going out of state? Like, how did you feel about that? Because it's so far away. You haven't seen it. You can't go check up on it. Like, how do you feel about out of state?
Yeah, I mean, so far it's been really, really good. I mean, there's been some minor issues, and I'm always just like, okay, yeah, get it fixed. Send me a quote, or just text it, and she's like, okay, and then she sends me a bill, and then pays a little bit less for rent the month. So it hasn't been like it's been minor stuff. But you gotta put your trust in a good professional, right? You gotta have a good agent that can that you can talk to that will be able to like look at a house and be like, well, this is gonna have some problems, or this it's the bones are good, it's fine, it's fine for this, or so I think that's key is being able to like trust an agent, and it also helps to have like gone through the process a few times. Um, but really, ultimately, like, what are you buying? You're buying a single family home, which is, to me, in my mind, the most liquid thing in real estate, and it's the most valuable too, because it's the most desirable. Um, so the worst thing is going to happen is that you'll have to do repairs on it, and you might not be able to sell it really rapidly. But generally speaking, it's the most desirable, the most in demand asset. So for me, the risk of buying a single family home is pretty low.
Yeah, yeah.
Unless you buy something that's like terrible foundation or something like that, and then you can't sell it or. But look at the inspection report.
Yeah. So for this home in South Dakota, did Oxford Homes, right?
Yeah.
Did they line it up for you saying that we'll definitely make this
Yeah.
into an Oxford home before
Yeah.
you purchased it?
Yeah. So I mean, we basically have had an agreement with them.
Did you have a rent number established before even
Yeah,
buying the
and
home?
and we had a rent number established too. So we knew like we were going to cash flow $800 a month.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome.
Okay. No, that's great. Yeah, and then just jumping back into kind of the start of your career, I know you've had a really interesting career path. Can you kind of get into that? Because
It's only interesting because everybody loves cooking. So
No. Everyone loves eating.
oh, that's true. Everyone loves eating. That's and watching people cook.
yeah, cooking
Watching
is
people.
glamorous. Like, I love watching Chef and all those things. So
Yeah, it's so funny that like cooking and chefing has become glamorous. I mean, it sort of was to not as the extent it was now as it is now. Like everyone else, I sort of read that No Reservation. I mean, not No Reservations, but I read Anthony Bourdain stuff, and I got into cooking in college. And really, partially for well, one, I didn't know what I wanted to do after I graduated. I went to a liberal arts school, a small liberal arts school in Iowa called Grinnell College, and yeah, I had no idea what I wanted to do after I graduated. I majored in Chinese and anthropology. I did double major, neither of which are like readily employable. I mean, I could have gone and worked for a corporation in China, probably. Like work for an American corporation in China, and I have some friends that ended up doing that, and it worked out really well. But I after living in China for a year, I was like, I want to be home. I want to be around my family. And I had always liked cooking. Like in college, I got into it because, like you said, I enjoy eating. And I was on a budget then too, so I was like, well, I got to learn how to cook. if I want to eat. So I did that in college. I eventually I worked at the local like nice restaurant there, the Frenchy one. I did an externship there, and he had me like collate his bills for a few. For a lot of the time, he was like, "All right, you go. I'm gonna disabuse you of this notion that you want to open a restaurant because it's a terrible idea." And but so I worked with him for a while and learned all the basics.
We can name drop, right? You worked at Paley's place, right?
Yeah, so that was after. So after that, I went to culinary school here in Portland. So after college, after still not knowing what I wanted to do, I was like, all right, I'm gonna open a restaurant, right? So I went to culinary school, worked at Paley's, which is where I was making like $11, $12 an hour, um, and yeah, I was there for three years, and then I took a chef position at DOC. So I mean, in 6 years, I didn't bounce around a ton. I really only worked at 2 restaurants, and I got to that point in my career where it was like, well, there's no more verticality. You know, I guess I could go like work at a golf course or something like that, or a hotel. But I was sort of in that fine dining mindset, which is, you know, you're kind of like in the restaurant world, it's like you want to, you know, be artistic, right? You want to be
Yeah.
creative. You want to be coming up with new dishes, and you want to be providing an experience for people. And so for me, that's what I was really into. And when I tried to convert that into like the next level of ownership, it was really hard to resolve the artistry and the business. Because I did find a restaurant that was semi-successful. I mean, it was successful, and more importantly, you could own the real estate underneath, and the seller was willing to sell. Um, and the owner was willing to sell. And so what I did is like my dad's like, oh, you better go like talk to someone from Score, which is have you? I don't know if you've guys heard of that, but
No.
it's a great. I'm not even sure what the acronym stands for, but they're small business. It's a like I think it's a nationwide nonprofit where you can get advice on business. And all these guys are like guys and gals are retired business runners, and they'll just kind of like, you know, for people that have no idea, they'll help you look at the books and figure out like, okay, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense. They'll meet with you. So I got all the finances, went over all the paperwork with him, and he's like, well, yeah, I mean, this business is profitable. Like it does make money. You're going to be working there. It makes money because you know you're the owner's working there full time. This is what your margins are. I mean, 10% on a good year, you know. But it just kind of made me realize, like, you know, it's cool. It looks good. I could own the restaurant. Could make a living doing that. Have some real estate to retire on. But what I saw was just that long term problem of wanting to spend time with the family, right? And working nights and evenings and weekends and holidays is how you keep the rest. I mean, that's when you get the most business in the restaurant world. That's, you know, I think the day after Thanksgiving, Christmas Eve are like the three busiest days of the year in fine dining. You know, Valentine's Day, of course, like, you know, Mother's Day, whatever. All those holidays where you want to be with your family just
Yeah.
are just crazy. And you know, I could see long term like not being able to like you know, could never do bath time with kids and that type of stuff. And I was like, maybe like I love cooking, but maybe that's not the only thing that I could do to make a living, right?
Yeah.
So I yeah, like I was saying, I crunched the numbers. It didn't look perfect to me, and I'd always been interested in finance, and I had a long-term plan of building a portfolio of passive income, and through real estate. And so I was like, well, why don't I like learn how to do this and do it for myself and do it for my friends and family? Because I looked at like becoming a realtor and a financial advisor, and I kind of weighed in the pros and cons of all of those. And I thought, well, let me try this one because this is what my plan is. And I had a good experience getting my mortgage with a colleague of mine now that's now a colleague. So I just reached out to her. And I was like, hey, how does this how does this job work? I've never even heard. I never really knew about it until I got my mortgage, and I never tell you about it in school or anything. And she's like, well, why don't you come on as assistant? So I worked for her for about 6 months, and then just kind of slowly built a pipe from there.
Awesome. Awesome. One of the things I took away from everything you shared, Jordan, and thank you for giving us the story. Nobody succeeds alone. We're all in this together, and when you're clear about, why you're doing it, like to spend time with family, like I heard you say, everything else falls in place, especially when you find the right people. If you don't know the right people, go out and seek those people.
Yeah, I didn't know a single person in real estate.
Yeah,
like I didn't have a single. I had no family, no friends in real estate. I mean, I just reached out to our realtor, and I reached out to my lender, and and then it just went from there.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that, I mean, everybody in this room, there's no straight line success path for real estate. We all started doing different things. Like, I've had 2 careers prior to real estate.
Mm-hmm.
I know like it's a snaking path, and sometimes you just happen to meet the right person who gets you to think in a different way towards moving towards this direction.
Well, and it's interesting because like people kind of know what a realtor is a little bit more, I think, than what a loan officer is, because I mean realtors are just better at advertising to the consumer in general, right? They're
They don't
better
have
at
reality shows
yeah.
about lenders closing deals. Can you imagine that?
Yeah,
That might be a good riff, though. We could do a spin-off.
yeah, just a picture of us. But no, it's funny because I mean, like people still don't really. They ask me what I do, and then they're like, "Oh, okay. Oh, you used to cook though. Like, tell me about that."
I guess it's really hard to sell that you're crunching these numbers for them. That your rate is this certain percentage, and this is your mortgage. Like it's not the sexiest thing in the world.
Well, yeah, I mean, they assume that it's like, I just bank's lending me money, and that's what's going to use to buy the house. But I mean, there's a little. I'd like to think that there's a little bit more to it than that. In my opinion, what I love about the job is that what I've really learned is more than anything is how people, besides building relationships and talk and communication skills and marketing, what I've really learned is how people make their money. When you have a diverse client set, it's really interesting to see like how people make and save money. Like I learned how to invest from some of my clients just by like reviewing their tax returns and talking with them, because I thought it was super interesting. I was like, because I was looking at one guy's capital gains, and they had just gone up crazy in the last couple of years, and he was an executive at Microsoft, and we just started casually talking about it. But it's fun to like unravel that mystery, and see what it actually looks like on paper, because everyone makes money in different ways, especially self-employed folks. It's very interesting. Yeah.
I would like to give you kudos too, because a big part of his role as a lender or loan officer, really important for that, especially the first time buyer client. Buying a home is a big scary thing, or even an investment property. And when you're going through that underwriting process, there's a lot we don't understand or know. And so having a person who really does take the extra time to really explain and educate the client is ultra important, because I've also seen had some loan officers I've worked with, not by choice, but we have to work.
Sure.
We got to play together.
Yep.
And I can see the differences for sure, Jordan. And our clients, I don't even know what to do. I don't know what any of this means. How much money am I even supposed to have ready? I don't even know. Like those are some scary but common things that I have heard and seen. I know that whenever I work with a client who's working with Jordan, they're just telling me how so great you are, and about spending that time and teaching them, educating them, because that's how we move the needle and how we help other people realize what else they can do.
Yeah, and I would also like to give kudos to you, Jordan. Just thinking creatively, because I think any mortgage lender can put in the numbers into a computer and spit out, here's your rate, here's what your mortgage is going to be. But finding creative solutions for my clients, like I think that is the biggest value. Like if you could sell that, I mean, obviously you do, because we always keep referring you people. Like that's the biggest value for my clients, because these big box mortgage chains, they can go to Rocket Mortgage, and go get a loan, but they're not going to get that personal service
Right.
and what they need to do and how they need to prepare for getting the loan for the house.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like a lot of the job is just kind of like getting people to send you documents, right? And some people are just like, yeah, sure, no problem. Some people are like, why do I have to do, and it really helps, I think, at least in my experience, is to just, talk to them about it and like, well, here's why I need this. And I know it doesn't make sense, but this is this is how the bank looks at it. And for some people, that's what they really need. They just, I mean, it's like when you're, showing homes and explaining, or you're talking to somebody about why you need to list it for a certain amount and why you can't make an offer for X amount. Because in their mind, they've got something in their mind that how it is, but that's not how the other side's going to see it. That's not how the underwriter's going to see it, right?
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you for taking us on this journey with you and sharing with us. Stephen, any other questions you want to ask?
No, I mean, well, as mentioned, Jordan is the regular co-host, but if you're listening to us for the first time, Jordan, how can people find you?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Jordan at jordanleemortgage.com. And yeah, if you just Google Jordan Lee Mortgage, you'll find my website, which has it has our podcast on it, and it has all the contact information there, and Instagram as well.
Yeah, be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and where else, Steven?
Acast?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
That's our podcast host. But yeah, YouTube, Spotify, and
Yeah, Portland Real Estate Investing Podcast.
yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Great. Thanks, everyone.